There is a reason this garden feels peaceful before we study a single detail. It is not because the space is empty, and it is not because every surface has been reduced to a simple minimalist form. In fact, the garden is filled with contrast. Straight paths meet curved lawns. Formal architecture sits beside naturalistic planting. Bright white walls rise behind dense layers of foliage. Smooth timber decking meets stone, water, grass, and handmade green tile. Yet none of these elements seem to compete. Instead, they support one another. The house provides order and proportion, while the landscape introduces softness, movement, and seasonal change. Between these two worlds is a carefully designed transition made from terraces, paths, ponds, planting beds, and outdoor rooms. In this tour, we will look beyond the beauty of the images and examine the ideas behind them. We will study how the garden responds to the architecture, how its circulation creates depth, why water appears in different forms, and how a restrained combination of materials and plants makes the entire property feel calm, generous, and complete. The first and most important design decision is that the garden respects the character of the house. White stucco walls, tall arched windows, restrained roof lines, and dark metal frames create a contemporary interpretation of Mediterranean architecture. Rather than treating the building as a background object, the landscape continues its visual language. The main outdoor living areas begin directly beside the interior rooms. There is no awkward strip of unused ground separating the house from the garden. When the large doors are opened, movement between inside and outside becomes natural. Furniture, flooring, light, and views appear to flow through the facade, rather than stopping at the glass. The curves of the windows are echoed throughout the landscape, but they are never copied too literally. Rounded planting masses, curved pond edges, soft lawn boundaries, and arching vines repeat the feeling of the architecture. This repetition helps the house and garden feel related without making the composition predictable. This is one of the most transferable lessons in residential landscape design. A garden should not look like an unrelated project placed next to a building. It should feel like another room of the same home, shaped by similar proportions, colors, materials, and visual rhythms. One of the most memorable features is the long band of green glazed tile. At first, it appears to be a decorative walkway, but its real role is much larger. It acts as the visual spine of the garden, establishing a strong direction and organizing the spaces that sit on either side. On one side, the path is connected to timber decking and outdoor seating. On the other, it meets water, planting, or lawn. The line remains recognizable even though the surrounding scenery changes. This gives the garden continuity and prevents the different activity zones from feeling disconnected. The strong linear perspective also makes the property appear longer. The eye naturally follows the tiles toward the far boundary, passing seating areas, water features, and changes in planting along the way. Instead of seeing the garden as one flat space, we experience it as a journey with a beginning, a middle, and a destination. The green color is an inspired choice. Neutral paving might have disappeared beside the timber and white walls. The tile is distinctive enough to give the garden an identity, yet its color still belongs to the landscape. It reflects foliage, shallow water, and the changing sky. Circulation becomes part of the composition rather than a purely functional requirement. Water appears in several forms, and each form creates a different emotional response. In the first garden view, the pond has an irregular outline edged with river stones, reeds, grasses, and water lilies. It feels as though it has slowly developed within the garden rather than being installed as a decorative object. In another view, the water is contained within a clean rectangular basin. Here, it relates more directly to the geometry of the house and pathway. Its dark, reflective surface works like an outdoor mirror, collecting fragments of sky, foliage, white architecture, and moving light. In both versions, water is positioned between areas of activity. The deck is used for sitting and conversation. The lawn encourages movement. The pathway supports circulation. pond rests between them, creating a moment of visual stillness. It gives the eye somewhere to pause before moving farther into the scene. Even a relatively small body of water can make a landscape feel deeper. Its surface suggests both a world below and a reflected world above. It introduces subtle motion, changing light, wildlife, and seasonal interest. Because these ponds can be seen from the house, path, and seating areas, they become part of daily life rather than isolated features hidden at the edge of the property. The garden uses a surprisingly broad range of materials: white plaster, natural timber, green glazed tile, gravel, stone, glass, water, and dark metal. Despite this variety, the setting does not feel busy because every material has a clear and consistent role. White plaster creates clarity and brightness. It becomes a neutral canvas for shadows, climbing plants, and the changing colors of the garden. Timber introduces warmth and makes the outdoor spaces feel domestic and comfortable. Without the wood, the composition might resemble a formal hotel courtyard. The deck reminds us that this is a place intended for everyday living. The green tile is the signature material. Because it is visually strong, it is used in controlled bands rather than covering the entire garden. This restraint makes it more memorable. A distinctive material loses its power when it appears everywhere, but becomes a defining feature when it is repeated selectively. Gravel and stones soften the transition from architecture into planting. They add texture without demanding attention. The hierarchy remains easy to understand. White walls provide structure, timber supports human activity, green tile creates identity, and natural stone connects the composition to the landscape. The planting is one of the main reasons the garden feels mature and immersive. Instead of surrounding the lawn with a single thin border, the design builds vegetation in several vertical layers. Mature trees form an upper canopy. Medium shrubs create volume at eye level. Perennials, ferns, grasses, and ground covers fill the lower layer. Climbing plants form another important layer. They connect the vertical surfaces of the house to the garden floor. Blank walls become living backgrounds covered with texture, flowers, and changing shadows. This reduces the visual weight of the architecture without hiding its form. Much of the visual interest comes from contrasting leaf shapes rather than from flowers alone. Olive trees and ornamental grasses provide fine, delicate texture. Hydrangeas and hosta-like foliage offer broader leaves. Palms, cycads, and agaves introduce sculptural forms. Ferns and aquatic plants soften shaded areas and pond edges. This garden is successful because it has been composed rather than merely decorated. Every major element supports another. The architecture establishes proportion. The path organizes movement. The deck supports daily life. Water creates reflection and pause. Planting softens structure. Materials connect the house to the landscape. The beauty of this garden does not come from luxury alone. It comes from balance. The design is modern but not cold. It is lush, but not chaotic. It is structured, but not rigid. It feels private without becoming isolated. Every space has a clear function, yet the overall experience remains calm and natural.